I'll let you introduce yourself, tell us who you are, but over to you, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is David Howell, and I have been involved in schools work since 1980, and also have been involved in the local sacre since 1997, when Swindon became a unitary authority. Can I just see, first of all, any of you actually on the local sacre, the Standing Advisory Committee for Religious Education in your local authority? Anyone? Oh, good, so I won't be able to get that wrong because none of you on that. Any members of senior management team in schools here? Okay, thank you. A few. Any governors? Any school governors? Okay, great, good. All incredibly important to what we do. I must preface what I say, this is relating to the situation in England and Wales. The situation in Scotland and in Northern Ireland is different. They have different structures, different systems. So in terms of that which is legally required and statutory duties and the like, they are partly devolved to those authorities. So schools have a legal duty to teach religious education. That came through the 1944 Education Act, also in the 1988 Education Reform Act. So that's one of the first things we need to recognise that in terms of what a school has to do. You will probably know that for most, or rather the actual legal requirement that I've found, RE must be taught to all registered pupils in maintained schools, including those in the sixth form, except to those withdrawn by their parents. This requirement does not apply to nursery classes in maintained schools. So in every maintained school, that's the actual requirement to teach RE unless a child is withdrawn at request of the parents, and arrangements for withdrawal are normally made by the local sacre if it's a maintained school and governed by the local authority. We are obviously in a new situation throughout most of England, particularly with the new academies, in that they are not run by the local authority. They sort of run on a direct line from the Department for Education, but many of them have the same structures and systems, and many of them use the requirements as laid out by the local sacre. So the requirement to teach RE normally means that most schools will major on Christianity as being as it were, the major faith of the nation, and they will then choose one of the other five. So there's often six major faiths there: Christianity, then Islam, Judaism, Sikhism, Buddhism and Hinduism. They also include references to other faiths, and also these days references to no faith at all. The British Humanist Society are quite anxious to get involved in local sacres and in the decisions made on RE, as they say they have an important part to play in that. That's for another discussion at another time. The next thing I want to point out is that schools also then have a legal duty to deliver collective worship. Again, in the 1944 Education Act, and especially Circular 194, which many of you who have been involved in schools work for some years may even remember when it came out, for those of us who were alive at that time. And you will know that the main feature from that is that the work, of course, is to be wholly or mainly of a broadly Christian character. I did that from memory. I know there's wholly in it and mainly and broadly, so I think you can actually move all those three adverbs around and it still comes out about the same. And most schools have interpreted that as being that at least 50% of assemblies or collective worship, whatever they do call them, is required to be Christian, and the others can be anything and everything. I found it very interesting when I was approaching this, particularly as a schools worker, about what I would do in assemblies. Because I was concerned as a parent with children in schools, how would I feel if the imam was in doing this same thing? And would they lead worship? Would they lead prayer in that way? Would they expect my children to pray in that way? Or or within Sikhism or Hinduism. And so I then tempered what I did according to what I believed would be right. So I did pray in some assemblies where it was appropriate with the school, but I would always preface it by saying, I'm going to say a prayer if you wish to, and then all the following words to enable people to decide whether or not they wished to be involved in that way. It's certainly not an easy thing to do, to work out how we fit in, and part of what I want to do is to look at that. I think one of the most important developments in all of this is that schools now also have a statutory duty to promote spiritual development alongside moral, social and cultural development. And this is a very important duty that they have. It came out particularly in the Education Schools Act 1992, and it was picked up as being a requirement that Ofsted had to fulfil. And the key thing about spiritual, moral, social and cultural development is that it's not a lesson, it's not a part of what happens in school. It is meant to be part and parcel of the whole life of the school. Everything that happens within the school should also enable the spiritual, moral, social and cultural development of the children and young people. It's important then that we know how Ofsted view that and how they refer to that. And from their publication in 1994, which was used in Maxine Green's book on spirituality and spiritual development for the National Youth Agency, I'll read it, and I'll read it slowly, and I'll read it a second time, because it's one of those very important ones that dictates, as it were, what we're looking for when we go into schools and do this work. Spiritual development relates to that aspect of inner life through which pupils acquire insights into their personal existence, which are of enduring worth. It is characterised by reflection, the attribution of meaning to experience, valuing a non-material dimension to life, and intimations of an enduring reality. Spiritual is not synonymous with religious. All areas of the curriculum may contribute to pupils' spiritual development. I'll read that again. Spiritual development relates to that aspect of inner life through which pupils acquire insights into their personal existence, which are of enduring worth. It is characterised by reflection, the attribution of meaning to experience, valuing a non-material dimension to life, and intimations of an enduring reality. Spiritual is not synonymous with religious. All areas of the curriculum may contribute to pupils' spiritual development. Ofsted Handbook for the Inspection of Schools, 1994. For those of you that want to just have that when you're next in school and talking to the head, just so they realise that you know your stuff. Okay, so the fact is that it is there, it's part and parcel of what schools do, and schools want to achieve this in what they do, because it is one of the tick boxes of the Ofsted system. So, the statutory duty, spiritual development, statistics. January 2010, there were 24,000 schools in England. 1 in 5 secondary schools were voluntary aided faith-based school, which means, generally speaking, in secondary terms, as it were, that 80% of the schools want to enable their children and young people to engage with spiritual development, and a further 20% also want them to engage in some way with spiritual development as well. So that's the statistics, but then what's the Christian agenda? Can I ask a very different question for a moment? I'm standing here looking at you pressing this button. I've created it so things would move and change. Are they moving or just coming up and down? They're moving, okay, because mine isn't. So I'll try and make sure I think I know what you're looking at. So what's the Christian agenda? I was tempted as a theologian to preface this whole talk by, it depends what you mean by. Okay, it does depend what you mean by the agenda, by which Christian agenda you're particularly looking at. And so there is a range of things that some Christians would be involved in. Some would think that we are just there to educate. Others would say we want to give them some more information. Or perhaps I should have put information and education the other way around, possibly. Others that they would want some form of faith socialisation. How do we enable, particularly from faith-based schools, how do we enable people to encounter and to be, as it were, socialised into the faith belief that we have, the religious practices that our church has? There are probably some here today that just would love to be involved in evangelisation in schools, converting each and every one of them. And there are some who, if we opened it out, we would discover, in fact, that they would prefer to be involved in straight indoctrination, because it's much easier to get people to ask questions. But actually, we all know that as far as schools are concerned, evangelisation and indoctrination are definite no-nos. And that actually, faith socialisation, it depends on the school and on the particular religious belief of the school and where it stands as far as how it interprets the locally agreed syllabus or the syllabus they use in terms of their work. Often faith-based schools would be like that. So there's a Christian agenda. I would say that probably the faith socialisation is what we understand by Christian faith development. And there's been a lot of work around the areas of faith development. Some of you will have studied Fowler's work on faith development, others the development of that with Westerhoff, others the relation of faith development with general child development through Erickson and Piaget and others. So there has been an amount of work done, but actually one of the things I'm noticing is that there's a confusion of terminologies in much of the books that have been written. I was trying to quickly read two Grove Youth booklets on the way up, both of which relate to spirituality, both of which are written or partly written by Sally Nash, whose work is featured a lot in this. And there's often a mix of spiritual development and faith development. And actually, we do need to begin to separate those, because when you look at the school agenda and the church agenda, one of the things you begin to realise, in fact, is that there are two dimensions to this. The schools understand spiritual development, and as you've heard from Ofsted, it is not linked to religion. The churches understand, or at least we ought to understand, faith development, and it is linked to spirituality. And it's that relationship between the two that we as schools workers and as people involved in prayer space in schools have to be very careful that we understand. My way of approaching this, as I've thought this through, is that actually spiritual development is the language that faith development can use easily. We have some folks here from Germany, and it's great to see you. And one of the great things is for those of you who do have German, to talk to them in German so that they can understand. And if you know the language, it's so much easier to communicate the truth. And one of the things I think that's happening in schools is that they are knowing the spiritual development language, and that is enabling us to show that sense of faith development, because it's the same language, it's the lingua franca of what we do in schools. However, what we must be careful is to make sure we recognise where we are. We are not in church, we are in school. And so actually, the spiritual development is at the front, and faith development builds on that, but is not the leading part of it. And one of the key things is to ensure that you have had an appropriate relationship with key members of staff, that everyone, both on the school and in your team, understands exactly what is being done and accepts that, and particularly at the school say, yes, this can be done in this way. And so that's quite an important thing to do, and I would encourage you to do that. So, aiming to please. Is it possible to serve the school agenda and the Christian agenda at the same time? It depends what you mean by, and you have to answer the question.